Welcome everyone back to The Search for Clarity. We are joined again with R. Michael Anderson on Leadership Mindset 2.0, Evolving Leadership for the Modern World. So we'll be exploring what this means for the future today. And this is the second part episode from the previous one that we did. And I just wanted to remind you all that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individual contributors. This podcast is my own independent effort, and it is in no way associated or endorsed with any of my employers or clients. So just to introduce R. Michael Anderson to you. So he's the author of the Leadership Mindset 2.0 book. It is this one right here. If you haven't seen the episode we had already, I'd suggest go and check that one out because we lay a lot of the foundations behind what we're discussing today. But essentially, it's a book centered on evolving the leadership mindset to meet more sort of modern challenges that people are going to be facing within leadership. He's got a master's degree from Pennsylvania University his MBA, and he has got his master's in spiritual psychology from the University of Santa Monica. Been a very successful entrepreneur and director of several development companies and others. And he's given a nice overview of that in our previous session. But all of this has sort of helped him go on this journey of self-reflection and understanding, which has really brought this connection of psychology to business and this focus on personal development and emotional intelligence and helping people become more effective leaders, and led to the book that we've got today. So we'll be unpacking and drilling into that a little bit more. We left off, Michael, we talked about the growth leadership path last session, where we talked about the release and rest part. We talked about the rewire and reprogram part. And now we are going to be, I guess, asking you to share a little bit about what leading others, we've got the various leadership styles, a great little test that you can do within that section as well. And what that all means for people trying to find and get this leadership mindset 2.0 through this process of growth leadership path, leading others. What is that all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So, just to recap the first two steps, if people are new or they're listening, the first one is from the psychological standpoint, releasing and resetting. So there are some things, if you're in leadership and especially newer to leadership, there's some things you have to let go of. So old habits, old beliefs, old patterns. So once we clear out what you don't need, then we go into rewire, and we rewire you for the proper type of confidence, the proper type of presence, that the proper type of resilience you need to be a leader, the proper mindset. The first two is really psychological based. The second two are more practical based. And in the leading others, this is about creating a high performance team. It gives you very, very, the tool, the book, I think, has 62 different skills in it. There's a lot of leadership books out there that are very philosophical, very high level, and there's a place for them. But to me, this is like a handbook. Mm-hmm. We talked last time, Richard, about how there's no flow chart, that you need a tool kit. And to me, that's what I do. I give everybody all these tools. The chapters are short. Everyone's a different thing. Handling difficult conversations, delegating, et cetera, et cetera. So when it comes to leading teams, look, you should have a vision. You should have a purpose. You should have all these different types of things to really create a high performing team. So how can you really do that without hiring a consultant and spending a year and a half doing it? So I have some templates on that. I spend a bit of time on, for example, holding people accountable. That's that's such an important thing to do as a leader and to have a high performing team, but you want to do it from an empowering standpoint. Mm-hmm. So how do you have these difficult conversations? I spend a lot of time. I have a really clear process for delegating. That's one of the things most people come to me all the time for. How do I delegate? How do I delegate? Well, you have to understand, again, that's where my psychology and neuroscience standpoint background helps, because there are reasons why you're not delegating. So let's talk about why you're not delegating. Let's talk about why people don't like to give up control. People are afraid of what's going to happen. They don't like the uncertainty. And when we can get clear on why you don't, then we can now talk about the right way to go about delegating. So it gives that blueprint to creating that high performing team so that you can put that all together and create a team that you can really be proud of, that has your respect and is going to achieve their goals.
I also liked in in that section of the publication that difficult conversations, and it was about and letting people go. And we talked about this in the previous segment about how there aren't always there's some guidelines that are definitely established for being an effective leader, but there are often times you kind of need to trust your intuition and trust your experience and understanding yourself to be able to sometimes step outside of those guidelines to be able to make difficult decisions and so forth. And I really like the fact that you provided quite a practical model around, how to have a difficult conversation, pre-framing and so forth. And also with regard to how to let people go, because I think that's also a very often a challenging aspect of being an effective leader, is identifying that, sometimes you get a team that's not performing, and it might be due to certain catalysts within the team. And you can coach, you can mentor, and you get to a point where unfortunately those difficult decisions need to be made. But what's great is you start to provide some practical application, as you mentioned before, out of the philosophical down to the practical side of, how do you address those kinds of things? And I like that a lot about the publication. It wasn't just the great parts of leadership, it also went down to the more difficult places for your own internal reflection, but also in terms of practical application and, other people in the team as well.
Yeah, if we just talk about letting people go, or look, this is going to sound dramatic, everybody, but bear with me because I think it's important to talk about firing people. I'm not a big believer just go out and fire everybody. There are some corporations like fire your bottom 10%. I don't really subscribe to any of those, but I will bring this up. I heard of this study, and I actually don't know what specific study. So this I don't have a citation for this, but I heard that they interviewed CEOs that had been retired. So they took a bunch of retired CEOs and they said, what do you regret most? What would you have done differently in your career? And two things stood out head and shoulders above everything else. One is during a downturn, they would have done layoffs quicker because, when you're in a downturn, nothing sucks the cash out of a company more than keeping a lot of staff on.
Mm.
And the second is getting rid of mediocre employees faster.
Mm.
And I can't tell you how many times in my companies that we would have the same, our weekly management meeting should we let go of so-and-so who's a nice person, but they're not performing. And in my experience, if you have somebody not performing, you absolutely make sure you coach and mentor them. Mm. And if they're either going to get it or they don't. And if they don't get it, you put serious effort into getting them there. But if they don't get it, if they don't start making progress in 2 or 3 weeks, don't wait 2 or 3 months or 6 months or a year just hoping they're going to get it. It's not serving them. It's not serving you. It's not serving the other people. Because the thing is, if you have A players who give their all, they're working super hard, they really are performing, and then one or a couple people on your team aren't, then I'm like, well, if I'm one of the superstars, why should I try that hard? And it's such a drain on your organization. And you leaders out there, how much time you spend thinking about these mediocre employees. Should I keep them or should I not keep them? Yeah. Look, if they don't get it, they're not going to, if they don't get it in 3 weeks, why are they going to get it in 3 months? And we often avoid these difficult decisions of letting them go. Look, I know there's HR issues. I was up in Norway. They're like, we don't fire people in Norway. I'm like, okay, well, you don't fire people. Then, I won't talk about that part of it in my presentation. So I know there's cultural things to it. All I know is if you want to create a high performing team, you want everybody to be a high performer on there. There's no exception to that equation. So if you truly want a truly high performing team, everybody there has got to be pulling their weight. And if you have one person or 2 people or 3 people, that's more than that. That's dragging your team down more than just what that 1 or 2 or 3 people are worth, because it's a culture issue. It's you're putting up with mediocrity. And look, it's hard to let people go. I had this one guy we hired. He was the sweetest guy in the world. He had every qualification in the world. He just couldn't. He would go to a client, they would be like, how long does this take? It should take 30 hours. He would proposed like 300 hours. We're like, dude, you can't spend 300 hours doing a 30-hour. They're not going to pay for that. And we worked with him and we kept him, and he was so nice, and he loved everybody, and everybody loved him as a person, and he loved the culture, but he wasn't the right person for this job. And he was never, ever going to be the right, we worked, we coached, we couldn't get him. And it broke my heart. But now he's probably in a place where he's enjoying, because he wanted to be part of, people want to be productive. Or maybe they need a wake up in their life. They need a wake up call. They need to be like, look, you aren't performing. You have to figure out how to perform. Maybe you're not serving them by not giving them that difficult piece of information. So that is my, again, I don't want to say go out and fire everybody because they're not, but you as a leader, that's why leadership's difficult. You got to make these difficult conversations, these difficult decisions. And we have a tendency as leaders to put off the difficult decisions, which just fester. Like anything else, it just festers. It gets worse with time.
Yeah. That makes complete sense to me. Yeah. I think that, and it resonates with me a lot with what you're saying. I mean, there's a lot of people who are in career who haven't had the opportunity to have that self-reflection. Say, for example, a leader who's gone through a lot of reflection, who understands their strengths, their weaknesses with situations they work well in. And I see it a lot in my career as well. I see a lot of people who are in their jobs, they're not entirely happy, and they haven't identified the fact that what they do doesn't quite sit with their strengths, perhaps, or it doesn't quite sit with. And by strengths, I mean they're where there's a lot of resistance against. You can always grow your strengths, but there's a lot more resistance if your strengths are sort of placed differently to what you do in your day-to-day work. It's not pleasant, right? It's that choice of, this is absolutely want to do. It aligns with my values. It aligns with where I want to be and where I'm going. They don't have any of that contextual understanding. And so there's this constant resistance to their progress, and they're not progressing because they're not in that role that really leans on their strengths. And it's something that's far more aligned to what they're looking for out of life. And so I appreciate absolutely, if people had that reality, they'd probably realize that they're not in the roles that are going to bring them happiness at the end of the day either. So it's very much sometimes the leader, hopefully it doesn't get to a point where you're having to lay someone off, but at least be able to, in a very coaching, sort of constructive way, illustrates that individual that, it might be better placed in a role such as this or that. And I suppose, if I may, Michael, I need your viewpoint here, but that kind of leans into the letting people go element as well, more as it's not just about letting them go, but it's kind of how do you better place them as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. And as I was just reflecting on this, the fact is, if you have somebody that's not performing, and you're an authentic leader, you really communicate clearly, they should understand that they're not performing, and they should understand why.
Absolutely,
so this shouldn't be a surprise, And if you have a good culture, they might. I've worked with leaders, and this has happened for me too, where they know the conversation's coming, and they might be like, "Yeah, this isn't the right position for me. I'm letting the team down." So when you have this culture of open communication, you're like, "Hey, Joe, we've worked with you. This is what we need to get done. You're consistently not getting it done." They know that they're not getting it. There should be no surprise. This is not getting it from behind. And by that time, especially if you have good relationships and a lot of respect, they're like, "Yeah, I think this might not be the right position for me either." And also, like you said, Richard, sometimes it's about shifting them. Hey, maybe you're not good in this department. Maybe you'd be good over here, because we like if you have people with good attitudes, with good that do work hard, and they're not performing, chances are they're doing a task that doesn't match up with their personality.
Absolutely, yeah. So strategy and influence, the final sort of part of the growth leadership, you talk a lot about executive presence, which I really enjoy as a topic. You had several topics around strategic thinking, and then, looking at leading with humanity, diversity and inclusion, etc. You want to tell us a little bit more about that final step within the pathway?
Yeah, and I really enjoy this because I don't find anybody else really teaching this, because what happens is leaders come to me and they're like, I have to be more strategic. And what they don't mean is, they don't mean that they need a strategy for their company. Almost all companies and teams, they understand the strategy. They have a consultant come in for 2 days or whenever they go to a board retreat. They have the strategy for the year. Your team probably has a strategy that rolls up to the company strategy. That just having a strategy is the freaking easy part, right? It is, though, as a leader, every decision you make should have a strategic bent to it. Every problem that you run into should have a strategy to solve that. You need to be acting more strategically. Sometimes some leaders, their team says you need to be more strategic. Sometimes the boss tells them they need to be more strategic. Sometimes they make the board and they're not participating strategically. So there is that. It's really fun to teach people that this is all learnable stuff. This is all stuff that you've never been. How many people out there have been taught how to participate properly in a board meeting? Probably none.
Exactly. Yeah.
When you are lower in an organization, and if you're talking to somebody lower in the organization and talking to somebody higher in the organization, your language has to change. Your cadence has to change. The person lower in the organization is really good at details. They're very tactical, so they want a lot of details. When you're talking to somebody high in the organization, they need to deal with a lot of different issues. So you need to be very concise. You need to be very summarized, because they don't want to get dragged into these details because they're looking at strategy. So we can prepare you as a leader on how to communicate to higher level people. We can communicate on what the conversations look like and sound like, what language you're using, what do you have to put in there. For example, just to give everybody, a sample of this, you want to talk about risk and return often. The higher up you are, when you're at the lower in the organization, your job is to normally eliminate risk. Like, I have a customer, I don't want anything to go wrong with it, right? I got, a project, I don't want anything to go. That's your job. The higher you are in the organization, the more risks you're going to take, the more, initiatives you're going to have out there. You have to always be, what's the risk return? And what I mean by that is, what's the benefit of this going to be? And what's the cost of this going to be? What's the cost in terms of money, in terms of, risk? What if it goes wrong? Is it going to sink our whole company? Or is it just, we lost $1,000? Are we going to put 15 people on this? Or is this going to be like 8 hours of somebody's time? So when I'm in an organization, I hire an executive, I'm always trying to make these decisions. So if you come to me and you're like, hey, I have this project and here's the potential benefits, here's the risks. And I'm going to be like, okay, I can make a decision. And by the way, when Richard brought that to me, he brought that to me in a real strategic way. I'm going to make sure he's at our next strategic meeting because I like how he shows up. And I'll tell you what, every executive, well, I don't know about everyone, but I do this. And I know a lot of other executives. I'm always evaluating people whether they can hang in a strategic meeting. Like, it's like, this person might be brilliant, but every time we ask him a question, he gives us a 35-minute answer when I need a yes or a no. It's like, hey, Frank, can you get this done in 2 weeks? Oh, I got 3 people working on this project, 8 people working. No. It's a yes or a no. Or it's a no, but if you allocate me 20 grand more budget, I can do it. That's the type of answer I'm looking for. So it's really getting people to adapt, how they communicate and how they show up to be a more strategic leader.
And so the culmination of this path from the perspective of the publication is it's really points of really important reflection at each step of the path to help you become transparent for yourself on the inside, to position yourself, to understand where your weaknesses are and what you need to do to enhance those skills. And you've got a lot of those tools in there as well. And the way I like to think of it, it helps you become transparent on the inside in order for you to be transparent on the outside. So in effect, communicating more effectively, people understand what you're, you mentioned earlier on the culture of someone will know that they're not performing. That it won't be an ambiguous thing. That culture of transparency will then emanate from you as a leader because you've got that clarity inside. And so it made a lot of sense the way in which each area of reflection through this path led to exactly as you're putting it, the Leadership Mindset 2.0 getting installed and uploaded to the brain throughout the path that you laid out. Would that be an accurate reflection on the whole thing, Michael, or am I doing it any injustice at all?
Richard, you're doing it so good. I think I'm gonna have to pay you for the rights to use transparent internally to be transparent externally. So that was really well articulated. I think you articulated even better than I. I was trying to bookmark it in my head.
A pleasure to be of service. I add these quotes all the time. So
yeah, it's about really getting clear about who you are, bringing that up, get that then out to your team, and then being strategic, impacting people on a larger level. Exactly.
Sort of start wrapping up. I think two questions I had was, what would you say in your experience are the most common misconception leadership have about leadership that's holding them back today?
Ooh. Most common misperceptions about leadership that's holding them back today. That they have to be a jerk to hold people accountable, that they have to let go of their ethics to be a strong and powerful leader. They don't realize that you can hold people accountable. You can be a powerful leader from a state of positivity and empowerment. They think you got to be a jerk to do that.
Yeah, I can see a lot of that.
What do you say? What's your answer to that question?
Well, I think it comes to what you've even documented in your first part of the whole publication, your experiences where things were sort of going wrong. There's a screaming voice of insecurity, and not, I don't want to allude to the fact that leaders are insecure. That's not the truth. I mean, when you've got tremendous, it's so circumstantial. I mean, your company's not doing really well. You're a good leader, but you just got really unfortunate time of the market. You've got unbelievable pressure. As a human being, you can only do as good as you can, right? So you end up, the cracks start to show just because you're human. I think it's a difficult one because there's just so many scenarios, to try and get under the hood as to what makes someone a great leader is, I guess, again, being able to uphold yourself under that pressure. And maybe it's just knowing when you're not being yourself, having that reflection, Michael, if you know what I mean, like knowing that you're just absolutely, things are falling apart, but you are aware of the fact that you're not behaving the way you would want to behave, just in itself is really powerful for a leader to have in their pocket. If that makes sense, if I'm not going too far off track with my answer to you there.
Yeah, and that self-reflection, the more stress you're under, the harder that it is.
Absolutely, yeah. Because your blind spots just grow because, yeah, time is no longer there, etc. So, I definitely agree. I guess the other thing I wanted to find out from you, I think from at a practical level, is in Leadership Mindset 2.0, you discussed the idea of leaders needing to be more conscious in their roles. And I think we've sort of alluded to it and talked about it a bit. But how do leaders become more conscious and place the time to be more reflective in their roles today?
What's interesting, that's the other thing that the higher you are up as a leader, the less you should be working. Because thinking strategically is a reflective process, and you need to. I heard of this guy Warren Roosted, and he's amazing guy. He's very old now. He worked for President Ford during, I think, the transition from Nixon. He was when he was really young. He was in the NBA. He's amassed an amazing business career. Now he's on the board of like 40 companies. He every day he goes into his office, shuts the door, turns off all his electronics, and just thinks for 4 hours a day. People were like, what do you think for 4 hours a day? Is like, yeah, he's there to be a strategic advisor he's on the board of like 40 companies or whatever. They need him to think. And so when it comes to being more conscious, when you were a doer, you needed to get stuff done. You needed to get through a to-do list. As a leader, your to-do list is, accessing your intuition, forming great relationships, understanding, the different trends that's happening, understanding what the culture is. Those are feeling type things. If you're back-to-back meetings for 10 hours straight, you're not conscious of what's going on. You're in this doer mode. And so you, as a leader, you need to start taking time out. You need to go on vacations. You need to start taking walks outside. You need to do that to be great at your job. You can't be busy all the time. And so that consciousness comes from, and the thing is, we're so addicted to the being busy. We're so addicted to having that long to-do list. We think we're valuable because we have the long to-do list. No, to be strategic, you need to, what I try to do every couple months, and if anybody out there, they're dealing with a really complex problem, if you want clarity on how to solve that problem, go in the woods for 3 hours and don't do anything. Don't exercise, don't hike. I mean, you can walk around a little bit, but they're not there to walk. Don't take your pet. Don't go alone. Don't go with anywhere that anybody's going to come around you. Just go and just sit there. And it's going to be really uncomfortable for like 45 minutes because your brain's going to be like, this is stupid. But then after a while, you're going to be like, oh, okay. And things simplify because your brain can just run through all that processing. And that's what I mean by being conscious. And you really need to take yourself out of if you really want to be creative, you have to take yourself out of your environment to do some of this reflection. You seem pretty conscious, Richard. What are your tactics around this or strategies around this?
It's very much about the journaling. I take quite a bit of time out to sit down and journal through a lot. And that self-discovery has helped me tremendously. I mean, going through just your book alone, I mean, I've obviously gone through not similar, but exercises of self-discovery prior through my career. And I've seen the remarkable effect that it has once these light bulbs go off in your head and you get that spotlight on an area and you're like, oh, that explains so much as to why I behave in those situations that way. But then running through your publication as well, it's great to just get another few glimpses at, oh, yeah, I need to polish up on it. It's an ever-going journey, right? But journaling is that part of holding the space to be able to let those thoughts settle and make your mind up about them. And I find that is the great way to say, like, yeah, I think coming back to that previous question we had about the misconception around leadership and, people thinking they have to be assholes to be good leaders. It's being able to sit down and say, yeah, I treated that person like that because I was pissed off. But if I really think about it, it's because I was feeling uncomfortable. I wasn't really sure how to deal with the situation. And I got aggravated about it. And that was actually my reaction to myself being imposed onto that individual. And that reflection, to your point, is pivotal. And so if I reflect back on what you've just said, how to be more conscious in the role, it's dedicating hours and making sure that you've got this holy ground in your week, to sit down and just let the thoughts settle so that you can pick at them, make your own decision around how you're feeling about certain ones, and then learning from that process ongoing. And again, using a publication like yours, because it's built for that. It's built for that reflection and just asking those challenging questions, really digging deep so you can get more transparent on the inside in order for you to be transparent on the outside.
That's your new tagline. I love it. Is there a specific, I'm interviewing you now, Richard, by the way, I turned the tables. Is there a specific journaling methodology that's easy to share with everybody out there?
It's a great question because I am one of those people who like to find the best way of doing things. So when I started looking at journaling, I would look for, what are the key things you should be doing when you're journaling? And what I've fallen back to at the end was no rules. You just open it up and whatever's on your mind, you just write it down. And it's that I write it down because there's this it slows my head. Again, everyone's unique, but it slows my thinking down when I have to write, and it helps me feel what I'm feeling. And then that whole process reveals a lot to me because I'm aware of my emotions while I'm writing it out. And then I ask myself the question, well, why am I feeling like that? Or why did this feel that way? It's lots of whys. And that, even if I write garbage and it makes no sense on that day, or there's nothing to write about, I just write about a bunch of stuff. It's just the practice of writing, is what I've used for my approach to it. And you've talked about meditation in your book as well, which is really helpful. I do that as well. I spend time to try and settle the thinking and just getting still of mind. And then I'll do some journaling, and that would be how I go about doing it, Michael.
Great. Thanks for sharing that.
No problem. Well, thank you again, Michael. This has been such a great session. I really appreciate your insights. I mean, I've learned a tremendous amount reading through your publication. I'm hoping that everyone else gets the same value as I got out of it. I will be sharing the links to it, along with links to other resources that are available from our Michael Anderson. And I hope our paths cross again. Thank you so much for your time once again, and I hope everyone continues their search for clarity on the topic of leadership mindset 2.0. We hopefully have a lot more better leaders out there because of it. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Pleasure.